I did not understand why I got an aggressive and deadly cancer when I was known as a health nut. That made no sense to me. I had none of the risk factors for this cancer. I had to find out what caused it and what I could do to help my doctors beat it.
Could the keys to prevent and even cure our deadliest diseases such as cancer and heart disease be found within the pages of the Bible? Breast cancer survivor and author Ginny Dent Brant believes it can. In fact, she did the research to find it and lives the lifestyle she discovered in her determination to survive cancer to prove it. Welcome to A Stronger Faith, a podcast that puts you in the arena with the experiences that change the faith and understanding of God of everyday people. I'm your host, Stacy McCants, and our prayer is that God speaks to you through today's conversation. Before we get started, I'd like to ask for your help. I believe you may know of someone who has had an experience that changed their faith. It may even be you. If you do, we'd love it if you shared that with us. To do that, visit our website at astrongerfaith.com and click the Recommend a Guest button on the homepage. We'll then follow up to see if they or you might be a good fit as a guest. God has moved in some wonderful ways through this process, and we hope you can play a role as well. Today's conversation touches on a topic that's important to me personally and that I believe we don't consider to be connected to our spiritual life often enough: the keys to good health that can be found in Scripture. Ginny Dent Brant survived an aggressive cancer diagnosis through God's providence and by His pulling back the curtain of truth to reveal how He designed our health and healing to work. Today, Ginny Brant shares that journey and those findings with us. Please meet author and breast cancer survivor, Ginny Dent Brant. Today, I am in beautiful, and I have to say beautiful, Seneca, South Carolina, in the Clemson area. And as an Alabama football fan, I'll be honest, as I drove in last night, I was a little on edge. I didn't know. I was like, what kind of people are these? What is this place going to be like? And all these Clemson people. And there's orange all over the place, and drive down the street, and there's tiger paw prints all over the place. And I'll be honest, it's fun. It's a lot of fun and nice people, and I had a great dinner, and the area is just beautiful. So I am in the home of Ginny Dent Brant, and Ginny reached out not long ago and was talking about a topic that really, really interested me personally. And God just opened the door for us to get together and have a conversation about it. And so, Ginny Dent Brant, I am so excited and thankful to be in your home.
Well, I'm glad you drove all the way here because this is a great pleasure to be able to do this with you in my home, even though you're from Tuscaloosa,
I have
Alabama,
worn no
enemy
crimson
territory.
I wore blue the whole time. I don't know if blue's part. I think blue is a part of your colors, but I didn't bring a lick of crimson with me. So anyway, when in Rome, right? So it's been a great experience, and I do enjoy stuff like this. But you have a book. I remember seeing that on there. It's like, I should read her book and see how this story unfolds. And I did. It's called Unleash Your God-Given Healing, 8 Steps to Prevent and Survive Cancer. And so I had my own health scare that we'll talk about throughout this process. And I was like, now I know what it takes to prevent and survive what happened to me. And I happen to know that it should be very similar to what it takes to prevent and survive cancer. And from the faith side of things, I'm really interested. So I read the book. It took me a couple of days, and because I couldn't put it down. And so I got to tell you, the book's good. The writing is really good, and I was flowing through that thing beautifully. But when I read the book, I was like, okay, yeah, I think I need to talk to this person. And so we connected, and here we are. And so we're going to talk about your story. And I've seen other interviews that you've done, and I think you talk on the health side of things really, really well, and we want to definitely get to that. But we also want to talk about your faith and the spiritual side of things. So you got a diagnosis that was a gut punch. Anybody that gets a diagnosis like this, it's a gut punch. But for you, you lived a fairly healthy life prior to the diagnosis, which made it confusing. Talk through how you came to know of your condition.
Well, it was just 4 months, Stacy, after my mother had died from breast cancer. So I was still in a grief state. That was the last parent to die. And it was kind of like a gut punch, as you said, just because of that. And it was unexpected and just totally unexpected. I had just done the Cooper River Bridge run with my husband, and that night, my ring got tangled in my nightie, and that woke me up as I was trying to free it. I found the lump. Now, quite honestly, I wasn't too concerned because I knew I didn't have the major risk factors for breast cancer, and I'd been getting my mammogram, so I really wasn't too concerned, even though my mother had just died from it. But I immediately went to the doctor, thinking it was a fluid-filled cyst or, not much, but I was going to check it out just to be safe. And the first shock came when they called and said, it's cancer. And then the next week, they called back with more news. More tests had come back, and they said, it's not just cancer. It's aggressive cancer. Nobody wants to hear that. And then it was about 10 days later, the results of my MRI came back, and I was to meet with the surgeon to discuss them to get ready for the surgery. And he looked at me and he said, Ginny, it's much worse than we thought. It appears to have planted other tumors. It appears to be in your lymph nodes and in other parts of your body. In other words, he was saying, it looks like a stage 4 aggressive cancer. Those are not survivable. They're just extending your life. And so he said, we can do things to extend your life. That's all we were talking about here. And so it was the shock of all shocks. But it motivated me to get a second opinion. And so I went to a cancer treatment facility where they specialized in my type of cancer. And that's very, very important. And so my husband and I got on an airplane. We flew to Chicago. And that's probably one of the best things we could have done at that point, because they looked at all the same tests, the MRI, the biopsy, and what they came up with, yes, it's an aggressive cancer. Yes, we're going to have to pull out all the weapons of mass destruction to save your life. However, they said, we're not sure it's all over your body. We're not sure it's in your lymph nodes. What we're seeing is inflammation all over your body on that MRI. And inflammation and cancer can look alike to many eyes. But because they saw it every day, they said, this is not cancer, all of this that we're seeing. It's inflammation caused from a biopsy that could have killed you.
The biopsy could have killed you?
It is very rare, but what they're saying is, yes, a biopsy.
So that was a biopsy that
spread inflammation like a tornado all over my body. My book is an analogy to The Wizard of Oz, and that's when the doctor told me it, I didn't believe him. And so he pulled up the MRI on a life-size screen and showed it to me. And I said, oh, my goodness, it looks like a tornado has invaded my
That's scary.
body.
Did he do that after he had told you that was from the biopsy, or was this before?
Well, this was after the MRI.
Okay.
So it was just the MRI was showing the debris, not just the cancer, but the inflammation from the biopsy. And I don't want to scare people that biopsies cause inflammation. This was a rare case. It's not something that normally happens, but it happened, and it happened in a big way. But it led to a diagnosis that was not totally true. But when I went to Chicago, they narrowed it and said, we're not going to know how far this has spread until we actually do the surgery.
Okay, so I got a question, and I'm paralleling it to mine, so we're going to probably parallel these things. I want to talk about your story, and it's not about mine, but I want to be open about this as well. 8 years ago, I had a heart attack, and I was young, small kids, and I couldn't believe that it happened. Couldn't believe that it happened. And lifestyle decisions, I've come to learn, is what caused that. It wasn't, people think it's a genetic only or 90% genetic or whatever. That I've learned that that's not true. It's genetics can play a factor, but much smaller than what people thought. When it happened to me, I remember surviving, which was good, and coming home, but I was terrified. I wouldn't take the kids anywhere with me in the vehicle because if I died right there, they would see it. Or in the summertime, I wouldn't turn the car off, close my door, and then walk around and undo their car seats to get them out of the car. I would leave my door open in case I died between there and the other side, and they would survive and not have a hot car incident. It was that kind of mentality. I felt like I was going to die at any time. And what that did for me was it created this state of depression. And I believed that my fate had been sealed. No matter what happened, that my life was going to be shortened because of this condition and because of what happened to me. Did you have any feeling or sense of being down in that way? Or were you, as a cancer diagnosis is different for people in that we don't really have time for that. We've got to take action. We need the second opinion. We've got to get started on treatment. We've got to do these things to potentially save my life. Was there anything going on inside of you that was a little bit of a hint of depression?
I wasn't depressed. I was scared. I was in shock. But my husband and I, the first thing we did when I got the cancer diagnosis was he laid hands on me and prayed that God would guide us and that he would provide healing. And we went on a walk to relieve the stress. I'm a big walker to relieve the stress. So believe it or not, even though my life changed on a dime that day, I did not get depressed. But we did sit down and I realized I could die from this. But I looked at it like this. If I die, it's my ticket to heaven. And if I know for sure that I'm going to die, or if that's what all this comes to, then I'm going to go out praising God because I've had a wonderful life. I have nothing to complain about. And that's the way I viewed it. Gratitude.
Yeah, I don't know that I was in a spiritual place at that time to do that. I was scared to death.
No, the fear came first.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, and I'm thinking back on it now, I don't know that I had that faith in. I don't know that I went to God when confronted with this. I felt alone. I did. I truly felt alone. And if I had to coach somebody now, of course, faith is very different now than what it was 8 to 10 years ago. But turning to the one who is hope is your only chance and can provide a place of peace and comfort. I realize that now. And if I had to coach myself back then, that's probably what I would say. But I'm always curious when people go through something like that, how it hits them. That first punch, how it hits them. And it sounds like you and your husband went straight to God in prayer and you got peace around things pretty quickly.
But I did not understand why I got an aggressive and deadly cancer when I was known as a health nut. That made no sense to me. I had none of the risk factors for this cancer. And that was another thing. It's just like I had to find out what caused it and what I could do to help my doctors beat it. I was going to try to live. I was going to do the best I could to get through this cancer and help my doctors beat it.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people would say to that, well, Ginny, it just happens sometimes. Regardless, it just happens. Nothing caused it. And I'm not really good with that answer.
Me neither.
I don't think God put disease like cancer and breast cancer here. I think it's the result of the original sin, of us saying, no, I think we want to be God. We want to make our own decisions about these things, about what's right and what's wrong, and we want to alter maybe a little bit of your design. I think it's nice and all. There's some beautiful things for sure, but it's not all right. And I think a lot of people would say, don't worry about how you got it, because you can't do anything. Not only can you not do anything about that, you can't really do anything about getting it in the future, because it just happens sometimes. I mean, what's your answer to that?
I had a lot of people say that to me. Don't worry about it. Just treat it. But I was concerned about it because everything has a cause. And not only did I not have the risk factors, they did extensive genetic testing. I had no genetic factors, so I couldn't even blame it on genetics. I had nothing to hang my hat on.
Yeah, and that would be the other thing they would say. You inherited
it's just
this.
your genes.
Yeah, that's right.
I couldn't say that. I didn't have the BRCA1 or the BRCA2 gene or any of the genes that would help me to get this. So I knew it was something I had done. And let me say this too. A lot of people get angry at God when they get a diagnosis. I had learned early in life to trust God, to go to God, but I've also learned to be introspective and say, what part did I have in this? Because here's the deal. If I don't figure out what caused my cancer, once the doctors beat it, how am I going to prevent it from coming back? The whole thing with cancer prevention, heart disease, all these things, all these illnesses, is that you must change the terrain of your body. And if you don't realize what's causing it, and if you don't change, then it's likely to come back. It may take a certain amount of years, but I did not want it coming back. Hear me clearly. Once you go through this, no cancer patient wants that cancer coming back.
This is really important because what you're saying is that it doesn't just happen to some people. It's not just something that emerges randomly that, I guess it chose me, as if it's drawing a name out of a hat. What you're saying is it's caused by something, just like heart disease is caused by something. You could change the things you're doing in your life, and if you dial in the right combinations, you could never have heart disease or cancer if you discover the root cause. And so I think that's really important for people because people think that they don't really have control over whether they're going to get cancer or not. They just hope they don't.
And they don't think they're going to get it.
Yeah, and they say, lung cancer, for instance, and somebody who never smoked getting lung cancer. Well, I guess, I don't know. I never smoked. I guess it's just a random thing. And they just kind of dismiss it. And they don't look back and say, wait, something causes this to happen. But when you got to this point, you got on fire to do research to figure it out.
Nothing could stop me. No stone would be unturned in my quest to discover why and what I could do to help my doctors to beat it and keep it from coming back.
So what did that look like?
Well, I delved through the scriptures, looking for everything I could see about what God said about the body and how he created it and our responsibility. And, you look right there in Genesis, after he created Adam and Eve, he tells them, I have given you these foods to eat. And what were those foods? They were seed-bearing plants, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, herbs, spices. And the interesting thing is, today, scientists can tell you, only in this day and age, every antioxidant, every phytochemical, every type of fiber, every vitamin and mineral that are contained in each one of these that all promote healing in our bodies. And then you look at the average American, what do we eat? We might get 2, 3, maybe 4 plants a day. When mainly, that's all Adam and Eve eat. And then you look at Daniel. Daniel ate a plant-based diet. What did he tell the king? I will not eat the king's rich foods, basically. Give me water and these plants. And who fared better?
Yeah, he told him to test him on that, and he came back, and his appearance and every other thing about him, it was noticeably different. Of course, the king's fat and happy, and that sort of thing. And we like to be fat and happy too, right? It's a sign of a success in a lot of cases. I try on clothes now, and they're all, the standard size is way too big because that's the average person's build. So, I would think that when you got the diagnosis that you would go straight to the latest science and research. And the first thing that you mentioned is you checked Scripture.
But I checked the medical research too. I mean, I went to cancer summits online. I listened to medical doctors debate and give interviews online. I mean, thousands of hours. I went to medical conventions on cancer and heard all the latest scientists, researchers, and doctors talk. And I mean, I looked everywhere I could, but I kept saying, God, guide me. God, direct me. And as I was praying that, he was kind of pulling back the curtain from my eyes because I had blinders on. I thought I was a health nut because I ate better than the average American. That is not saying much in this day and age. I might eat a salad for lunch where everybody was eating hamburger and French fries, but how many plants overall were I eating? At that point, I was probably up to 5 a day. Today, I eat anywhere from 10 to 13 plants a day. The nuts, the seeds, the fruits, the vegetables, all of it. And that's where the healing power is. And it's like God knew that we would get into trouble, that we would have sickness. And he's giving us these plants as food to help keep our body healthy.
Yeah, and there's other factors too that are important. That it's interesting that science is discovering all these things now. Right?
You can look at anything the American Cancer Society says lately, and years ago, just like you said, they would say, well, cancer's not something you did, okay? Mm-hmm. They said that for years.
Yeah.
They've changed their song and dance. They are now saying it is largely lifestyle, and a lot of cancer research centers are saying 90% what you do, 10% genetics. Mm-hmm. Now, that is a complete turnaround from 30, 40 years ago. And so when you look at the history of cancer in our country, you look back in 1930, the rates were 1 in 30 people got cancer in their lifetime. 1970, it went to 1 in 10. It was in 1972 that Richard Nixon, whom my father worked for as an aide, declared war on cancer with federal funding. What did that get us? A lot better treatments, targeting the treatments to the specific types of cancer, a lot of research, a lot of good things. But today, the cancer rate is 1 in 3 women, 1 in 2 men, and the children today, 1 in 2. We've done nothing to stop the diagnosis of cancer. And that's where we're losing the war on cancer. And it's because it's lifestyle, it's our environment, and we're not looking at doing anything about that necessarily unless it happens to us. Then we start getting curious and we start getting the curtain pulled back from our eyes to realize, oh, I was a part in creating this.
Yeah, I think we could spend hours, and I want to do that to some degree on the discoveries that are being uncovered now that have been truths since creation on what causes and prevents disease and the choices that we can still make now, even though we are in the world that we are in, the industrialized world and all the other things that contribute to that, and we'll get into those things. But so your response spiritually, how did you go to God in prayer post-diagnosis? What was your spiritual life like? Was it disrupted by this? Did you draw closer to God? Did the way you prayed change?
I definitely was on that roller coaster of fear and worry that you mentioned earlier. You can't, it's part of the cancer journey. But as I looked through the scriptures in my quiet time, I was drawn to Philippians 4, 6 through 8, where Paul is in the trial of his life. He's in prison, and he's telling us how to handle trials. And he says clearly, pray about everything, okay? Give thanks in everything. Gosh, even in the middle of a cancer journey? Yes. And number 3, look for the good. Look for what is pure, what is lovely. Look at the good things that are happening in the midst of the journey, because we know, according to Romans 8:28, that God's going to use all this for good. Now, here's the caveat, whether I live or whether I die, okay? I didn't know which it was going to be at that point. And part of the reason I struggled so hard to live was that I didn't feel like God was finished with me on this earth, number 1. And number 2, I did not want to leave my husband a widower. I knew how difficult that would be for him in life. And I've threatened him, if he does that to me, when I get to heaven behind him, I'm going to kill him again, So it's just, when I looked at the way Paul handled stress, and you look at Romans 8:28, God's going to use this for our good. And so I got off that roller coaster ride of one morning, strong in faith, the next morning, cowering on my knees, Lord, help me, and scared half to death. And my emotions started to level out, only to find in my research that, guess what? When you use your faith to manage those emotions and to manage that stress, your body is in a better position to heal.
See, that's what's so cool about all of this to me, is the discoveries that science is making that we were told about long, long ago, that God originally designed it. When we start talking about having a heart of gratitude, and you're thinking, that sounds nice, sounds good. I've got a nice thing over my sofa that's got that in needlepoint or whatever else it is. But I'm dying of cancer here. I ain't got time for all that stuff. And I'm going to wake up at 2:30 in the morning again tomorrow and stress and worry about that. And we all do it. I think about people I know who have gotten cancer. I can point to specific ones, and it came, the ones that I'm thinking about right now. Some of them have survived, some have not. And it came a short time after a major, major stressful thing happened in their life. A major stressful thing. And some months later, there's a diagnosis. And I can't help but think, and I want to know what the research is, and I'm so interested because you just said that we're beginning to discover that the way you manage your stress levels, it's not only just good for you just to have a good approach and to not be stressed, but I believe that stress, and I would say chronic stress or extreme stress that is not dealt with, is a significant factor in lots of diseases and the onset of these diseases. Is that what you found?
I did, but I didn't see it at first. I remember a lot of people saying to me, Ginny, when you have cancer, you need to look back 10 to 15 years. What was going on in your life? And there was a lot going on in my life. I was caretaking with my sister and mom for my dad with Alzheimer's disease. It wasn't just the caretaking, although that puts you in a stressful mode because you're missing sleep and you're running like a rat on a wheel, but it was the grief, the intense grief of seeing a brilliant man lose his mind. It was hard for all of us. So that took up about 8-9 years of my life. And then after that, both of my husband's parents went downhill at the same time, and we were their caregivers. They were in a lot of pain. All of our parents graduated to heaven, so we celebrated that. And then as soon as my husband's parents got through that and graduated to heaven, about a year later, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. So I was in a grief cycle I could not get out of. And when I went to a cancer convention and heard 15 of the speakers say that emotions are probably the biggest factor that can drive cancer and suppress the immune system to open the door, I was like, oh, I think they're talking to me.
This is a cancer research conference. And so when wonderful reference on Paul's letter to the Philippians and how he was managing this extremely stressful situation. And he talks about not being anxious. And I think that's where he gets into think on these things, right? Isn't that the same piece of scripture where he talks about whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, think on these things. It's not just a nice thing to do. It is a strategy for health.
Amen. It is. And when I saw the research that what long-term grief, not short-term, but long-term grief can do to your immune system, and then you start looking at anger, depression, all these things, they only suppress your immune system. So when I started to realize the role that emotions had, I had to look back and say, oh yeah, this was one of the reasons. It's never just one reason, okay? It was one of the reasons I got cancer, was living in a grief cycle I couldn't get out of for 15 years.
Yeah, but so somebody would say, well, what's she supposed to do about that? I mean, her parents, she was the caretaker, and there's stress that comes along with that. Is she supposed to just hand them off? People are going to have traumatic, difficult, stressful, high stressful things happen to them.
They are, and you can't prevent some of those things. In looking back, I would do things differently. I would make sure, I now use a heart rate coherence app. It's like $3.99. You can download to your cell phone, and you actually do deep breathing exercises to it, and it helps you to balance your sympathetic nervous system, because when it's balanced, you're in a more advantageous state in order for your body to heal. All that grief, it didn't serve me any purpose. Some of it was normal. I dwelt on it too much. If I followed Paul's standard, I was giving thanks because God had saved my father 25 years before he got Alzheimer's, and had taken him from politics through through the Watergate trials, where he was one of the only men that didn't go to prison, and that was a thank you, Lord, and took him into ministry all over the world for 25 years. And so I was grateful for that. I concentrated on the gratitude, but I dwelt on the grief too much, and I didn't do things to help relieve my body from grief, which is the deep breathing. And as Paul said, thinking on all of these good things. You cannot wallow in your grief. And I think I wallowed in it too much. Yes, it was a stressful lifestyle. I needed to take some things off my plate. I did not take anything off my plate. I was full steam engines ahead, and that can wear down your immune system as well. But the research is clear that gratitude promotes healing, hope, love and support, community, dwelling on the good things, prayer, meditating on His Word. All these things put your body in a state where it can heal. But when you dwell on anger, when you get in that waddle of grief where you're just literally basking in it, your body is not in a position where it can heal.
That's right.
Short-term grief is one thing. Long-term grief is another. So I kind of look at it this way. All of the positive emotions, and the Bible talks about them, laughter, joy, all these things promote healing. And the research now, scientific research, backs all of these things. But all of the negative emotions actually lower your killer cells in your immune system that fight disease. And so once you realize that, you realize why Paul said what he said.
And we, as Christians, believe that there is an enemy to God. And call him the devil, you call him Satan, whatever you want to call him. And I personally believe that depression that I got, your fate is sealed. There's nothing you can do about it. You're going to die. You got kids, they're going to watch this. All of that stuff. He is known as a liar and an accuser, deceiver. He's a divider. And I think we've got to be aware of that this is a tool of the enemy to destroy us. Okay? And if we sweep that house and make it nice and neat for those kinds of thoughts, we feed those thoughts, they strengthen themselves by our feeding them, then the result of that is going to be our destruction. That's a piece of our destruction. And so we can't just leave that to the winds of the world. We can't be blown around by the wind. We've got to take a hold of that. And it doesn't mean that we don't hurt because of the grief, because we've lost someone. What it means is, to me, and the way I think I see that, is that we've got to go to God and say, God, I know that the enemy is trying to destroy me with these thoughts and with these things. Take it from him. You take over here. Put thoughts of purity and joy and laughter and gratitude into me. Because there have been times when I have been in places like that, and I don't know how to get out of it. What do I just change my mind? Just like stop thinking about that and try to start thinking about something else? Sounds good. But when I've gone to God in prayer with that and say, hey, you know what? I don't know that I can do this, but I know you can, and so I'm asking you to do that. God can change our heart. I've come to know that that's a thing that I feel like I can say with authority. God can change our heart. He can change other people's hearts too. You can pray that he changes someone's heart, and if you believe that, it will happen. I've seen it happen. It's happened to me. So he's changed my heart. And so we shouldn't think that, well, I hope randomness eventually takes those thoughts away from me that you guys are now saying are destructive and can cause a disease that will kill me. I just hope that goes away some point, or I hope I heal eventually. I would say in that situation, I would say, you do it. Take it to God in prayer. Realize there is an enemy that is trying to put these thoughts into your head, and science today shows that, in fact, they will destroy you. It's not just destroy your mind, but destroy your physical body as well. And that we've got to go to God in prayer, and we've got to recognize that that's what's going on. And we've got to recognize the formula he's already given us, right? It's not just plants. It is plants, and it's exercise and these other things. But it is your spiritual condition to where you get to a point where you say, I'm going to find gratitude in this. I'm going to be an agent for him to turn this into good, for not just others, but for myself as well and his kingdom. I'm going to lay open for that. That's the direction I choose to go, because I am choosing to follow him, and I'm not going to let the enemy drag me into my own destruction. Is that your experience?
Yes, but I have to be honest with you. I met with the chaplain at the hospital in Chicago because I just didn't understand this cancer diagnosis. And I went to him in tears, and I said, I don't understand how a health nut got cancer. And he said, Ginny, your doctors don't understand it either, but I will tell you this. Your healthy habits will get you through the journey. You will do better if you keep those healthy habits. And then he said something prophetic. He said, you're a speaker, you're an author. Look at your cancer as a gift from God for you to help other people. And I looked at him, and I know you're thinking, I said, oh, yes, that's wonderful. I can't wait to. I looked at him, I said, you don't understand. I don't want this gift. He said, oh, Ginny, you could write the most fabulous book about all these things you're learning, and you could help so many people. And I said, I don't want to talk about cancer. I don't want to be known as the cancer queen. I do not want to write a book about cancer. And he said, I can see it now. Your next book about cancer, helping other people. And the first line says, this is the book I never wanted to write. And you read the book, and you know what it says at the first of the book. So I'm not going to tell you that I was this willing, super spiritual, I went through the ups and the downs and the fears and the worries and the shock. But I realized, I wasn't going to make it through this journey without starting out the day in God's Word and starting out with His strength through prayer. And that's an important thing that we should all be doing as Christians every day. But when we get in a health journey like this, guess what? That ramps up because we're flat on our back, and we can only look to God for help. And I look back now, and I see all the providential things that happened. The ring getting caught in my nightie. I wouldn't, I recommend to women that they do self-checks every month because mammograms do not detect all cancers. I wasn't doing that. So God provided the ring in the nightie. you know?
If you live a spiritual life, that's just not a coincidence.
It's just as my sister said, it was the providence of God that ring got caught in your nightie. And then when I was looking for a place to get a second opinion, I had been at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, and Cancer Treatment Centers of America has a booth there. And I remember walking near the booth and the lady there talking to me about it, because my mother had cancer at the time and I was talking to her, and she was just saying, we do second opinions, and I didn't know much about them. And then I went back to that when I needed a second opinion. Now, you and I believe in integrative medicine and lifestyle changes, and I'm big on integrative medicine. And I did not know that Cancer Treatment Centers of America was integrative. So this love and this confidence that I have in that.
Define integrative.
Okay, that means they're going to look for cause and purpose, and they're going to bring the best of conventional medicine with holistic to help you cure your cancer. So I have a nutritionist, and I have a naturopathic doctor on my case. I had an acupuncturist working on my behalf. I had all these things they brought together, but I did not know when I first called them that that's what they were going to provide for me. So that, made me feel so much more comfortable in the cancer journey. But I look back at going to that booth and talking to that woman. She reached out to me as I was walking by. That was the providence of God. He knew I was going to need the second opinion. Only a few months later, I already had cancer and didn't know I had it. Okay. And he already provided my mind to go back to that place as a second opinion. And it was the best place I could have gone for what made me feel comfortable.
Yeah. I think there are still a lot of people that hear that and say, oh, give me a break. This, acupuncture and, holistic and all this stuff that is, science is way evolved. We've got medicine, we've got techniques and that sort of thing. And that's exactly what we're trying to get people, I guess, to understand. That all of that stuff is just tapping into the way that the author of life designed it to work to begin with. When people start talking about, all that organic crap or whatever, organic crap, you know what that means? That means that all the chemicals that we think we've got to put on them to make things grow, they're just not there. That they are grown the way they were grown in the Garden of Eden, and up until recent times when we decided we knew how to raise crops better than God.
That's exactly right.
It's
now, I got to tell you, Stacy,
yeah.
What was found at my body in high levels that was also later determined to be a major reason I got cancer was those pesticides were found at high levels in my body. So I didn't change until seeing is believing, and you're sitting there going, this is the graph of what's accumulated inside of my body. And glyphosate, Agent Orange pesticide, I did not serve in Vietnam, and it's high in my body. I'm going, what is going on here? And that's when I realized, the things I'm doing on an everyday basis, I'm accumulating a chemical load. But God knew that would happen. He gave us 5 filtering systems. Your liver, your lungs, your colon, your kidney, your skin is your largest detox organ. And I had to tap into that to up the performance of those organs and to sweat to get all those chemicals out of my body. And again, that was found out not because I was so smart and figured it out. God was pulling back the curtain on my eyes, because the sauna company that my doctor recommended called me up and said, do you want to be in a clinical trial study? We will test the chemicals in your body before you start using the sauna and then track you monthly. Well, I thought it's the chemotherapy chemicals I was concerned about. Chemo was over. I wanted them out because the longer they stay in, it's going to suppress your immune system. And here I find, in addition to the chemotherapy chemicals, I have 15 other high toxic chemicals that were in my body and contributed to why I got an estrogen-fed cancer I had no risk factors for. These are endocrine disrupting chemicals, a lot of these pesticides. They found paraffins, phthalates, all these things that we use every day that we don't realize what we put on our skin is getting to our bloodstream, and it doesn't even have to go through a liver to filter it. But God knew this would happen, and he gives us these filtering systems, and we sweat through our skin, but we don't do enough exercise to sweat through our skin many times. So I now walk more, exercise more. I get in the sauna at least now 2 times a week. Back then it was 3 times to get the chemical load down. But when these chemicals build up in our body and they come in through what we eat and what we drink and through what we use in our homes, when they build up in our body, our immune system, our God-given immune system, gets distracted with all these chemicals. I have 3 chapters on this in my book. We've got to lower our toxic load. It's affecting diabetes. Now doctors are telling diabetics, lower your toxic load. Change your diet, but lower your toxic load, because toxins are influencing more people to have type 2 diabetes. It's affecting many things.
And you're getting beyond pesticides in food and antibiotics and things like that that's in food. You're talking about the air we breathe, the shampoos we use, the deodorants, the other things that are, just inhaling, breathing as you're pumping fuel into your car. I mean, all these other things that are places that chemicals enter our bodies. And I think we probably say, that might not be too good for me for that to happen. But since we don't see the consequence, I mean, we don't see the consequence pretty quickly. It's kind of like Pavlov and the dogs.
That's right. But I was seeing it on a graph. And so I couldn't deny that this was in my body. And so I had to trace back, how did this get in my body? And so I changed out my personal care products, my shampoo. I changed out pretty much everything in that pantry over there, everything in our bathroom that we use on an everyday basis, what we clean with under the sink. You can change it out to things that do not contain those chemicals. That really wasn't too hard. I just had to know, where this was coming from. And you can beef up your organs that God's given you, your kidney function, your liver function by what you eat. Again, you eat more plants, they're going to function better, right? And again, I don't sweat easily. My husband sweats a lot easier than I do. And that sauna is important for me to keep my body sweating so I can keep my toxic load down. My toxic load is the best it's been, but I have to keep it that way now.
Take us through the rest of your journey in the battle from getting this into where you are now. How did that process unfold?
Well, what I'm doing is, as I'm going through the cancer journey, knowing that every weapon of mass destruction is going to be brought out to save my life, okay? From surgery and chemotherapy and immunotherapy and drug therapy and all these things. What I'm doing is I'm looking at what I can put with what the doctors are doing, okay, to help my prognosis be better. For example, I'm going through chemotherapy, and water affects every organ, every system, every tissue in your body. It prevents cancer to begin with, being properly hydrated. But when you're in the cancer journey, increased hydration lessens the side effects of the chemo and helps the chemo to get to every cell in your body. And that's important. It also helps clean out the chemicals after they've done their job. You have to have sufficient water for all these organs to work right so that you can excrete all those chemicals, okay? And then exercise, which again, it was the providence of God that exercise helped me so much. I'm an avid walker, and I decided to walk 2 miles after the first surgery because I wanted the catheter out. And in addition, I got so much more because walking 2 miles on that hospital floor prevented blood clots, and then it helped me to pump the anesthesia out of my system. And there are all these tubes from the surgery my husband was going to have to babysit for several months. They pulled them all that day. So exercise is key as long as your doctor allows it. If you were operated on your knee or your foot, they would tell you to withhold that for about 5 days to reduce the swelling, then start to move. But you follow your doctor's, orders on that. And I decided that worked so well, I didn't want the chemotherapy. Who does? I would walk 2 miles before chemo and 2 miles afterwards. You'll rarely see a cancer patient do that, okay? But I did it to relieve stress. And here again, the providence of God comes in. After I finished the chemo journey, and my doctors are like, your red blood cells, your white blood cells, your platelets, 6 weeks after a year of chemotherapy, you should be half dead, and we're calling you our rock star cancer patient because all your blood levels are back in normal ranges. We never see this.
Is that because of the exercise?
We didn't know at the time because the research had not come out yet. But about 2 years after I finished chemotherapy, my doctors told me to look. They knew I was writing a book. They said, look at the new research out of Australia. It's saying basically 30 cancer entities came together to show that exercise is one of the best things a cancer patient can do, or to prevent cancer to begin with. And they were saying specifically when it comes to chemotherapy, as you exercise, you are pumping that lymphatic system, which is part of your immune system, and it's your trash disposal system. And you're pumping those chemicals out after they've done their job.
Aren't most people, isn't their response to chemo to be down and rest and that sort of thing?
That's what people have been doing for years.
Yeah.
They go lay in a chair or in their bed all week long, and they feel sick and they feel nauseated. I was up and going before. I was up and going during. I was actually walking around, dragging the poles with me, and then afterwards I was moving. And now what they're saying is they're starting to tell cancer patients to do this because of this research in Australia. Then MD Anderson has a study with mice that shows that the mice who were on chemotherapy that had a moderate exercise, every day, they did better with the chemotherapy, the side effects, and targeting the cancer. And so really what they should be telling cancer patients, and some people are now hearing this, after chemotherapy, do not lay down all week. Get up and move.
Yeah, it activates the systems that move things through your body, including the toxins out and things that need to be disposed of. It makes sense. But
I didn't do it because I was so smart.
Yeah.
It was the providence of God.
Yeah.
I was doing it to relieve stress.
Right.
And then I got all these other benefits. Again, the presence of God guiding me and directing me. And I don't even know why I'm doing what I'm doing, but I'm doing it and it's working,
Yep. So we've talked about diet and we've talked about exercise. We've talked about hydration. As I look at these and others that are to come that are in your 8 steps, so since my heart attack, and I changed my diet completely, and my whole lifestyle has changed, and I'm not even the same person at all. And just as you're describing, I did it so that I wouldn't die of a heart attack. What I've discovered is just so many other benefits that have come from that. My skin got better. My teeth got better. My energy levels got better. My stress levels began to come down before I ever directly started working on stress. Clarity of thought, all those things got better. My voice got better. Just so many things you would never anticipate. And when people have come to me and said, hey, talk to me about it. So I got some scary numbers on my cholesterol or whatever it is, and I don't know what that means and what I can do about it. I've always said, hey, look, I'm no doctor, researcher, dietitian. I can't talk to you about carbs and proteins and all these other things like a lot of people can, and which I'm sure you can because you've done tremendous amounts of research. I say, here's what I do. I try to get things back to the way God originally designed it. So if you look at food, for instance, the further it is away from the way God produced it and how it was consumed before that, the further it is away from that, the more damage it's doing, the more it's contributing to disease. The closer it is to the way God designed it, the more it tends to fight disease or prevent disease. And so when you look at things like stress, when you look at the way He designed things to work, so Adam and Eve and all the way up through even Jesus' time and beyond, people weren't just sitting around. People were active. They moved. They built things. They grew things. They
were forced to move.
Yeah, they had to. It was this natural movement that was just life, right? There was no offices where you're sitting at a computer all day or anything like that where you're not moving and active. And when you look at, I read a great book, you probably read it, called The Blue Zones. Dan Bentner and others.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's one of the ones that I read, one of the dozens I read when I did my own research. It wasn't that they were marathon runners all the time. It was just that they moved all the time. They were up and down the stairs. They were walking to friends' houses. They were just in motion. But it's the way that it was designed to work. And when we feel like we've got a better way because it can make us more money or help us to be more fulfilled in another way or successful, and it gets counter to that, that's when we start approaching places where disease gets created and caused. And so when people have asked me that, I say, hey, look, think about the way that it was God designed it to work originally, and get as close to that as you can. And the closer you get to that, I think the healthier you're going to be, and the less likely you're going to get disease, and the more your lipid numbers are going to get back into a really good range and all those things. That is like me bottling up what I found.
Same thing, I learned that. And the same thing is true for sleep, because people slept according to the circadian rhythm. They slept in the dark of the night, and in the morning, it was the sunlight on their retina that helped them to wake up. And so today we have all these artificial lights and all this Wi-Fi and all these things going on that are preventing us from sleeping, because if we get too much computer or TV exposure before we go to bed at night, then it's hard for us to fall asleep. It's in deep sleep that the miracles in our body, God created our body, first of all, to heal on an everyday basis.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're doing this interview, our body is performing healing acts, and we don't even know it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But when we go to bed at night, those acts of healing go up exponentially. And when we're in deep sleep, melatonin goes off. It's a hormone produced by our body that is an immune enhancer and a major cancer fighter. And that's the stage of sleep where our body restores, repairs, and detoxes itself. Think about it. How many Americans are missing deep sleep because of stress, because of trying to get things done in a job, or they think, well, I don't have enough time for this, and I've really got to do this for my job, or I've really got to do this thing, so I'll just take away from my sleep. And that time is where your body is doing its major healing. And I remember my naturopathic doctor saying to me at the cancer center, if you do not get deep, consistent sleep, you will not be able to recuperate from all these treatments that we're going to give your body. This sleep is going to be a key to you being able to get through chemotherapy and all these treatments. And she was right. I had to make it a priority. I had to remove the lights from my room, the alarm clock next to my bed. I had to plan to try to sleep from 10 to 6. 10 to 2, they say, is the prime time where your body does the deepest healing. It's all about the darkness and the light. And I just never got that much into the mechanics of deep sleeping, and it's free. Water's free. And exercise is free.
Yeah, people wear that lack of sleep like a badge of honor, as if that makes them some sort of superhero that they, I'll sleep when I'm dead and all that stuff. Well, here's how God designed it to work.
Right.
And you think you can play God with that, and it will cost you. And you don't get to make that choice. You think you're successful because you're up through the night all the time, and you hear it all the time. And people... You get emails from people in crazy hours of the night. I'm like, man, you think you can buck that truth that God created? And it's not true. I tell you, one of the things that I have changed is getting to bed. And people's like, well, no, that's kind of my time. And I think it's a dangerous thing to do.
The research is clear.
Yeah.
That sleep is when your body heals, repairs, detoxes, and restores itself. It's a gift from God in this amazing immune system we've been given. But, it's free, and we ignore it and think we can save time and get more done by taking away from sleep. And now I look at, like, if I'm going to fly out on an airplane and it's early in the morning, I will spend the night at the airport the night before so that I can get my full night's sleep. Because if I leave from here, I got to get up at 2 to get to Atlanta airport by 5.
Right.
To catch a 8 o'clock flight. You know how all that crazy stuff goes. And so I look at how what I'm doing is going to affect my sleep cycle. I'm like you. I realize it's important for every part. Hydration is important for every organ system and every organ. Exercise is important, and sleep is important. And so I've got to make sure that I'm doing those things. They don't cost me a dime. I can say this to young families. This is not going to increase your budget. The best gift you can give your child is a good night's sleep, and especially during COVID, where we know as educators, I was an educator for 32 years, when a child comes in sleep deprived and some little virus or flu is going around, who is the most likely to catch it but the child who is sleep deprived, the child who is dehydrated, the child who does not get exercise? So, these are things that families need to be teaching children at young ages, and especially during a time when we're in a pandemic.
I think people don't appreciate the truth in which God created it all to work to begin with. Because when we talk about being at work all day and we've got to have dinner for everybody and we've got 3 or 4 kids, and I just don't have time to do anything except heat up these manufactured chicken tenders, and they love chicken tenders. And so yes, they're fried in oil, and yes, they have preservatives all in them or whatever. That's all I can do. What am I supposed to do? What do we have to do to not be cool with that?
You just have to make it a priority. And, food doesn't have to be hard. Nuts and seeds and cutting up a piece of fruit or cutting up some vegetables, it's not that hard.
It starts early. I'll tell you this. So these things happened when my kids were really young. And so we began to transition into a lot more plants and stuff like that. And I remember going to it was like a kids learning center. And we took our kids there, and we knew that they were just going to have nachos, hot dogs, M&Ms, and all that stuff. And so we had like a bag of broccoli and, chickpeas and a handful of other things. My daughter had some allergies back then that would prevent her from having some of the normal things anyway. And I remember people looking at us, and because she'd walk over there and grab a stem of broccoli and just chomp on it like it was a French fry for most kids. And people were like, "What in the world? How did you get her to eat that?" And at that time, she's 1, 2 years old. It was like the answer was, that's what she knows as food. She's never had macaroni and cheese. She's never had chicken tenders. She just doesn't know what they are. Now, since that time, and spending the night and going to school lunches, and she's in whatever 3rd grade now, and that sort of thing. There's a battle because, of course, those things are delicious, and they're at friends' houses, and they're all over the place. But kids get to the point where, what they know as food? They know as food the thing that we have given them, the convenient thing, the macaroni and cheese, the chicken tenders and fries. And that's all they want. And it's getting to a point where it's all they'll eat. And so I always wonder what we got to do to change our mentality about that and say, hey, I can't mail it in on my kids' health. I don't see a consequence now. Maybe they don't get childhood cancer. One of the things I learned in my own research through this on the heart side of things was I was stunned when I read the first book that talked about you could reverse heart disease. I didn't think that was possible. And Caldwell Esselstyn, Dr. Esselstyn, he's got a book it was one of the first ones I read, called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And they had put people that were in a place where they had already had like a couple of heart attacks and severe angina, couldn't walk across the room because of the chest pains and all that kind of. It said they were like weeks away from death, and said, "Hey, there's one chance. Are you willing to try this?" And they were like, "Anything." And he completely put them on raw organic vegetables. That was it. They just ate vegetables. I mean, only that. No, nothing on them just raw. And within 2 weeks' time, their angina was gone. They did a dye test on them, and the plaques on their heart and their arteries and all that stuff that was at 80, 90% had dropped 5%, 10%. So the plaques started going away, which was unbelievable. One of the things that they discovered, though, is in kids that maybe had passed away in car accidents and things like that, kids that are 7, 8, 9 years old, had the beginnings of those arterial plaques then. So heart disease starts as a kid.
And so is type 2 diabetes.
All of that stuff is starting with those chicken tenders.
Yes.
It really is. And I know it's convenient. It's manufactured, highly processed stuff that we pass off as food that is building those initial building blocks of the thing that's going to kill that kid when either as early or later in life. The building blocks are being put in place. And so I wonder what we got to do to change that mentality and to understand and appreciate that we are diverting away from the way God designed it to work, and there will be consequences for that if we don't change our behavior.
It's true, and I think the worst place that Alton and I have to go and eat and worry about what we're going to eat is church events.
Yeah,
and you would think that would be the healthiest place,
No.
but it's the,
It's the worst.
It's amazing. And
It tastes good.
I
Yeah.
think education is the key, because what's changed me is when I learned what the chemicals are in these plants, then I want to eat more plants. I mean, I don't want my cancer coming back.
Yep.
I don't want to develop heart disease, and you better bet I don't want to develop what my father had, Alzheimer's disease.
Yep.
To me, there is nothing worse in the book. Give me cancer any day over that. And so I've been on a mission to do that. And when you read that, eating a cup of blueberries every day prevents your risk for heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, builds your immune system, helps your liver and kidney function, and feeds your gut and your bacteria. And you're going, well, that's a win-win situation. So I tell people to start one step at a time. When they're in the middle of a crisis like you and I were, they're moving a little more quickly through the process. But at least if they will start with one step at a time. Let's work on this month. We're going to all work on proper hydration, including the kids. We're going to all make sure we get our proper hydration and drink the things that are hydrating, and keep track of it so it becomes a habit. Let's look at foods we can add. You're going to add a new food each week. Let the kids try it. Let's try different ways of eating this so that they can be exposed to these things. A lot of these kids don't know what real food is, but when a family makes a change, you've got to educate people as you're doing it. And a friend of mine, Susan Neal, wrote a book called Eat God's Food. And so I recommend that to a lot of people, just to, start teaching your children from 3 years old up through elementary, even middle school, how did God create things to work, and what are his foods? And she makes it really fun and makes it informative. If you're going to make a change in your family, you've got to educate everyone to help get them on board. It's not going to be easy. But as they realize what it contains, what it does for their body, then you start saying, well, maybe that is a good thing for me to do.
Yeah, and right now people don't care, because you know what's delicious? Fried chicken and macaroni and cheese. And you know what's delicious? Chicago-style pizza and Doritos and all those things. And it's true. I got to tell you, they are. And I grew up on all of it. And I ate all of it until
Me too.
I did. And the deal is this: most of that stuff is designed to get us hooked on it.
It is.
To get us addicted, so that we'll buy more of it, so that the manufacturers of those things can have a more profitable company. That's the way that works. There's a reason that there's so much sugar in things. It tastes good, and we get addicted to these things, and we just do, and we've got to be able to recognize that. And people don't care. They say, that's what I want to eat, so it's my choice.
But Stacy, COVID should be a wake-up call for all of us, because during COVID, we were drinking all the wrong drinks that are dehydrating, sitting on our sofa, being sedentary, and we were eating junk food. Potato chip sales soared. And all these things only make COVID worse. We needed to be moving. During COVID in this neighborhood, my husband and I were walking that 2 miles a day, every day, no matter what. We were properly hydrating. We were eating nutrient-dense food, God's foods, God's plants during the pandemic. And we were making sure that we got our sleep. A lot of people couldn't sleep because of the fear-mongering, And so all these things were working against us when instead we should have been using them to work for us. Harvard researchers did a 9-month study showing that the people that ate the most plants got lesser symptoms of COVID.
Mm-hmm. And the opposite, I think we all were able to see this as well. Those people who were certainly immunocompromised or have other conditions or elderly for sure had some struggles with that. But of the non-elderly, the obese took a huge hit. I mean, I can't.
It was the number one comorbidity.
Even young people who really, really struggled, that didn't pass away necessarily, most of them were obese and had weight issues that stem from what they eat and the lifestyle that they've chosen. And so, yeah, it's, gosh, and I hate to even bring that up, but it's something that I think it's pretty well documented, who suffered the most and continues to suffer and continues to struggle and even die from this and other disease. And so I think we need to take a look at that and say, hey, look, you know what? I know I don't care and I don't really do the health stuff and that sort of thing. We have been duped into thinking that is the standard. And what's actually taken place is the standard in the way that it was created has been replaced with a lie. And we're paying the price for it in our health. And, this isn't, a deal where we're trying to promote a particular product or anything like that. What we're, I think, trying to do and the way this conversation has ended up today is helping people, hopefully, to recognize the way God designed it to work originally and begin to wake up to the ways that man has decided that we are God and we want things to taste this way and we want our life to be convenient in this way. And we have to understand that if we go all in on our way, that the consequences are that diagnosis. And I think more importantly, there are things that we can do if we've gotten the diagnosis to contribute to the success of our healing. God gave us that. Now, He can produce a miracle and you can get scans one day and you've got stage 4 and you could go in the next day and it be gone. It sounds crazy. I know people that have had that happen. But He gives us the tools for our own healing. He's already given them to us.
Amen. Well, you're making sure you're not suppressing the way He created the body to work. That's the way I look at it. He's given us a body that's self-healing. It was created to heal on an everyday basis. But when we do not eat the right foods, when we are not properly hydrated, when we don't move, when we don't get proper sleep, our immune system gets suppressed and then it doesn't work as He created it to work. So I always say we have to look at what we're doing. What was I doing to suppress my own God-given healing? And that's where the name of my book came from, Unleash Your Own God-Given Healing. Work within that. Enhance it. Don't suppress it, because that's what we're doing in America today. We have the most autoimmune and chronic diseases and the highest cancer rates and Alzheimer's rates in the world, and we're one of the wealthier countries in the world. So our wealth sometimes causes us to make choices we wouldn't normally make because we're tempted by all the king's food. As Daniel would say.
And we can go to the doctor and get the pill.
Right. And we expect our doctors to cure everything about us while we just sit in the chair and do nothing. And what I say to people is, you be part of the cure. Help your doctor. to beat that cancer or that heart disease, or if you're starting with dementia. I mean, new research is showing dementia in the early stages can be reversed just like heart disease.
Really?
Okay? But you got to catch it in the early stages, and you're going to have to change your lifestyle that helped to create this. That's Dr. Dale Bredesen, graduated from Duke University. He's one of the doctors. David Perlmutter, Dr. Perlmutter. There are many doctors starting to say this, but we're kind of spoiled Americans. We're used to having our way, and everything about food is taste. And now I look at food as medicine. What am I going to do to enhance the immune system that God's already given me? I don't want to suppress it anymore. I've been down that road, and I don't want to go back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've learned that too. That every bite you take, every drink you take, is either fighting disease or feeding it.
Right. That's exactly right.
And we've got to, when I talk to people about food especially, and I think it would apply to other aspects, I kind of invite people to put the foods they consume in a bucket. I'd say, just go through your week. Go through your week and log everything you consume. Don't miss something. Don't miss that handful of M&Ms you grabbed. I want you to write that down too. And you've got one, the bucket on the left is unprocessed plants, as natural as they can be.
God's food.
That's right. And then the next bucket next to it is processed plants. I mean, that's green beans in cans, for instance. They're still green beans, and that's good. But we've processed it. We've added some preservative, put them in the can itself, and that sort of thing. There's ways of altering that, right? And then you start getting into unprocessed animal products, then processed animal products. And then you get into the right side of like ultra-processed, like Little Debbie snack cakes and stuff like that.
I love those.
I know. Fudge rounds were my deal, right? I'm telling you. I could kill some fudge rounds. But anyway, and then you just consider those your buckets and say, okay, I'm putting everything in the bucket, and I'm going to take a look and see what my buckets look like this week. And don't try to go cold turkey, right? Don't go all organic plants. If you can do that, that's great, but unlikely. I mean, your body is addicted to all this other stuff, so you're going to have withdrawal symptoms, I promise you, and it's going to be a bad experience. You're never going to want to do it again. But if you begin to move things from the buckets on the right to buckets on the left, if you have 5 Diet Cokes in a day, that's no good, first of all. But next week, if that's 3, and that's been replaced with something a little bit further on the left, then you're moving in that direction. And you start to shift those things from the buckets on the right to the buckets on the left.
One step at a time.
Yeah, exactly. Until over time, and for me, it became a lifestyle. I really did. It's not a diet. Diets are the worst thing because they're by definition temporary. It's a temporary fix that's never meant to be sustainable. But if you begin to do this and it becomes your lifestyle and it changes the way you think about food and you begin to feel differently over time, and I'm just going to be honest with you, I wouldn't order chicken wings right now if my life depended on it. I mean, I guess if it was the only thing I had to eat, I would, but I wouldn't choose it. It's gross to me now. It's become that way. And before, it was life. And so it's just how it becomes. We've gotten it's like coming off of things that we've been addicted to. That's kind of how I have experienced it in my own life. And for me, my numbers have plummeted. All the markers that I had, my triglycerides were through the roof, my bad cholesterol was through the roof, my good cholesterol was terrible. And for a number of years, all those have just been reversed without medication.
And that's the key, without medication, because a lot of those medications may be necessary for some people, but they all have side effects.
Yeah, and they need to be temporary. It's the lifestyle change you should be looking for. And I got to tell you, I think people also, when they look at that, say, yeah, but you know what? I want to live a happy life. And I want to tell you, if I had to eat plants all the time, I'd be miserable. Life's too short for that. The old thing that says, eat the cake and all this other stuff because life is short. That's a lie. That's a lie. That is a lie of the enemy. As a guy who used to eat the cake, I'm on this side of it now, and it's like way better. It's way better. people think they have to trade joy for food if they were to do this. As somebody who has done both, this is better. This is better. You just got to trust me. I'm not selling something. I have no profit to make from this. I'm just telling you the way I feel, and even in the enjoyment of food now, I would say rivals the way I enjoyed filet mignon and fried chicken and all the comfort foods that I used to, grow up into the deep South, all that stuff. The way I enjoy food now rivals that. And all the other benefits, it's not even a contest. It's just not even a contest. And so I would just encourage people who think that I just can't go through life eating salad all the time. Well, I don't go through life eating salad all the time. I eat lots of different plants, and it is delicious, and it is variety, and it's great, and it's just a different way of thinking. And I don't know, I don't want to get too deep in on the plant side of things, but it is a huge, huge deal, and you don't have to trade joy for life.
No, you don't. And it's important that you, like say, if you use food as medicine, you view that food differently. And it's a gift. It's God's, He gives us so many gifts. And that's just one of the great gifts He gives us in life, is a self-healing body and all these wonderful plants and foods that actually enhance our healing.
So what happened for you? So you began to research this stuff. You began to explore. You began to implement some strategies that you were discovering were the ways that maybe God designed this thing to work. So how did it pan out for you?
After the chemotherapy, which was the worst treatment I would have because it would last for a year, and the immunotherapy was over, it takes 2 to 5 years for your blood work, your red blood cells, your white blood cells, your platelets to get back in the normal range. That's why cancer patients have suppressed immune systems for years, and some people, it doesn't totally come back. Mine was back in 6 weeks. How did it work for me? It worked. And so I was grateful that I'd gotten through that part of it. But these lifestyle changes had to be permanent, because if I go back to the old terrain and the old lifestyle, guess what's going to happen? I have more chance of the cancer coming back because I had an aggressive cancer treated with chemo. So I'm high risk for the comeback. I don't want to live every day worried about high risk. So that motivates me to keep the lifestyle changes permanent. And so it's an everyday part of my life, just like it is for you. And yes, I have to be checked several times a year. Yes, I'm high risk for it coming back. There's all kinds of things that could happen. So I consider each day that God gives me past cancer diagnosis a gift from Him to serve Him until He takes me home. And that's the way I view it. And I've heard a lot of cancer patients say those exact same words. Now, every day I have left on this earth is a gift. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to serve Him, and just like you said many times, make a difference in this world before He takes me home to heaven.
Yeah. So how long ago did you get your diagnosis?
It was about 6 years ago.
And since that time, it's not come back, or has?
Not come back yet. There's still no 100%
sure
guarantee. I mean, I've seen people on both ends of the spectrum, people that do everything wrong and they don't get cancer.
Yeah.
And I've seen some real, even medical doctors who are health nuts, who are integrative medical doctors, get cancer, do everything right, and the cancer takes them out.
How do
but
you
those are
explain
extremes.
that? Yeah.
Those are the extremes
Those
on
are
the bell
outliers.
curve. Right.
Yeah.
Those are the outliers. What happens to most of us is the bell curve in the middle.
Yeah.
And so these things apply to most people, and you don't make your judgments based on the person. A lot of people walk around saying, well, I do everything wrong and I haven't gotten cancer and I'm not worried about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are those people that do well during that, but they're this small percentage. And then you've got people on the other end that do everything right that die of cancer, and you go, whoa, well, it doesn't help to do everything right. No. For the average person, it does make a difference. These are just as you said, the outliers.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of flaw in the logic there. I mean, it's like saying a friend of mine got killed in a car wreck, and he was wearing a seatbelt. So seatbelts really are worthless.
It's the same principle because seatbelts save many lives.
Over the population, it is well documented that this is you can't make judgments based on the outliers, and I think people do that. I think they say, "Wait, so and so smoked. He's 95 years old. He smoked all his life, so it must be okay." Well, no, that's ridiculous. There's way too much science.
And
around.
Most people think they're not going to get heart disease, they're not going to get Alzheimer's, they're not going to get cancer. What I tell people is this, Stacy: put in a disease prevention plan now.
Yep.
One step at a time if you're not in the middle of a crisis like you and I were. And don't let it happen. Decrease the chances that you or one of your children is going to get one of these horrendous diseases. Because let me tell you, it is no fun.
No.
And the best thing to do is, 1 in 3,000 people have a house fire, but we all have a plan for that, right? But we don't have a cancer or a disease prevention plan for our family. And when you start putting these lifestyle changes in effect, then you are reducing your family's risk for many diseases, not just cancer. But don't think it can't happen to you, because the latest statistic I heard in medical seminars this week is that by 2030, they're saying the cancer rate will go from 1 in 2 that it is today to 1 in 1, meaning everyone will have cancer in their lifetime in the next after about 10 years. And if you look at the way cancer rates have gone, it makes sense that that could be true. And so I'm saying, wake up, realize what's happening around us with all these environmental things and these lifestyle changes, and start putting a plan in place. And I'm seeing young couples do this because they're seeing so many of their relatives having so many diseases, and they're going, what can we do? And I see more interest in the young couples than I do people our age who are set in their ways, and it's difficult to change.
Yeah, I didn't grow up that way. Granny always made it like this. And there are decisions that we can make in our lives now that can change our future as it relates to our health. And it's directly tied to our faith in the Creator God and the way He designed it. I think that's the point of that. And that's why we're on this. This podcast isn't designed to be one on nutrition and health, but when you look at the way the author of life designed it to work, and when you look at original sin, and that was essentially man saying, I want to be like God. I want to make the decisions on what's going to make me healthy and what's going to make me unhealthy, what's going to be right, what's going to be wrong. I get to decide my gender. I get to decide all these other things, right? I get to be God. And every time we've done that, from day one, it doesn't work out for us. And when we realize we're doing that with our lifestyle, even though we may be spiritually as connected to God as we've ever been before, but when we look and say, how have I gotten away from His original design? And is there a way that I can get back in alignment with the way He designed my health to work? How can I do that? What are the big things that you would say that would get us back to there from a health perspective?
It's definitely lifestyle. Like you said, getting in tune with how God created the body to work. We've got to be hydrated. We've got to move every day. We've got to get deep sleep at night and sleep in that cycle, that circadian rhythm where we sleep during complete darkness so that we can go into deep sleep and let that melatonin. God created all this food as medicine, and we've got to use it as medicine and not just everything based on what I want to eat and what I'm addicted to. I'm now eating food as medicine. What is good for my body? I eat 3 or 4 things that are high in just reducing cancer risk to begin with. Blueberries and flax seeds. And there's certain things I eat every day because they are, all plants in God's kingdom prevent cancer and disease, but certain ones are higher than others. And I include 5 or 6 superfoods in my smoothie every day. And that
Like
smoothie, well, I've got the blueberries, I've got the flax seed. Sometimes I put pomegranate seeds in there. I've got yogurt, coconut yogurt, because I try to stay away from as many milk products having an estrogen-fed cancer, if that makes any sense. And so I will use coconut yogurt because fermented foods help to build the gut lining, and that's your protection against disease. I mean, God has given us so many things, but most Americans have compromised guts. That's where that gut lining has tears in it, and things that are not supposed to get into our bloodstream that cause inflammation and circulate through our body that opens the door for many diseases are happening because we're not eating the right foods. And you've got fried foods and all these charred meats and too much gluten and the wheat that's not only been grown in glyphosate but harvested in glyphosate. And you've got all these things that are irritating this wonderful gut, this armor that God has given us to protect us from disease. So when you put it all together, there are steps we can take if we are willing. And I'm like you, when you get on the other side of it, you're like, why didn't I see this before now?
Yeah.
Wish I had known this sooner. Honestly, Stacey, I don't believe I would have gotten cancer. If I could go back, I don't think I would have gotten cancer if I applied what I'm doing now back then.
So people talk about, all right, what can I do? How do you get somebody started away from what they've always known food and lifestyle to be? How do you get them started?
One step at a time. Like you said, those buckets. You know, you look at how you're eating and you start moving one thing out of one bucket into the other and trying to find the replacement for it. I tell people to start with the meals their family loves the most and look at what you can substitute or change in that particular recipe to make it healthy. You can use coconut milk instead of milk. You can use nut cheeses instead of cheese if you're trying to cut back on cheese. You can use organic vegetables. You can add nuts and seeds. You can, I think I'm going to put more onions in there and more herbs and spices because all these are plants. Because the whole goal of a diet is to basically eat more plants because the research is clear. It helps with every single disease in prevention. And so that's the only way I think people can do it. I had to hurry along through the process because I had a pretty drastic diagnosis, okay? And I'll tell you, I had a friend, a pastor in New York City, served there for 40-something years, got a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. He read my book, applied it literally overnight, went gluten-free, dairy-free, meat-free, all plant-based, moving before and after chemo, properly hydrated. He just did it. I didn't even do that. But he's doing quite well. You don't do well with a stage 4 cancer and chemotherapy at 75 years old, but he's doing the right things and doing remarkably well because he's a part of the cure. And so I think people he did it overnight. I did it gradually but quicker. I think the average person who doesn't have a disease right now needs to take it one step at a time. Have that meatless Monday night with your family to try different dishes that don't have meat but that have plant-based protein.
Yeah.
And then try with different drinks that you can experiment with that don't have all the caffeine and all the sugar and all these things. Try different things and see what your kids like. My kids love my lemonade I make with stevia and lime essential oil and fresh lemons. And they think it's to die for. They call it Gigi's lemonade. So you start trading out one thing at a time, but the younger you can teach those children, as you said, the better.
Yeah, and I think about my own particular transition. I had never had a meal in my life until my 40s without sweet tea. Now, I grew up in the South, and that was just it. And the sweeter, the better. I mean,
it's like syrup.
Yeah, it was pretty thick, right?
You and my husband.
So I couldn't imagine life without sweet tea, right? I haven't had anything but water with my meals other than, coffee in the morning or a glass of wine for dinner if I go out somewhere or whatever. I haven't touched a soda or sweet tea or any of that stuff in years. And I think about it now, and it was like, that was my life. I couldn't imagine a meal without sweet tea and half of my plate being something that had parents, right?
Yeah.
Some kind of animal. And now we don't, I'm trying to think, we may have meat somewhere in our meal once every 3 weeks, maybe. Our plates are full of plants now. 10 years ago, if you would have told me that, I'd have said, you're crazy. I will die before that happens. Well, it's now my lifestyle. And it's great. And I don't know it as something different. And I think people think that they could never make that change, and nor do they want to, right? Because sweet tea's too good, and so are pork chops, and I just love them, and I'm addicted to it. And my point is, you can, and it can be done, but it's done, I've found, most successfully one step at a time, rather than you saying, all right, I'm throwing everything out today. Now, if you've got a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, that's not a bad strategy. You may be more motivated than most, but for the average Joe who doesn't have cancer, may not even have it in their family, and haven't experienced the consequences, but realize that they're walking down a deadly path, make the step. Take the turn. Just one step at a time. Get off the computer late at night. Or let's cut that back for 30 minutes. If you don't get off the computer till 10:30 at night, let's try 10:15 for a week. Do something. Take a step in that direction. Turn that alarm clock away from you a little bit. Reduce your stress in some way. Find a little more time to pray. Reduce the number of Diet Cokes that you have this week. And maybe the next week after that, you make another reduction. And see if you can live with that. And then begin to value that sort of thing. Maybe get out, and the weather's really nice right now. Get out and go for a walk after work or after dinner. Doesn't have to be far. Just do something. Just take those little steps, I would say. In my own life, that's what worked for me. Now, I run a few times a week. I'm running less now than I used to, but I run a few times a week. Yeah, I would have never imagined that I would have been a runner. Never. I mocked people that ran. I mocked these vegan crackheads, right? I mean, you guys have lost your minds. You think I'm stopping eating a ribeye, you're crazy. Well, I don't eat ribeyes. I eat vegan, and it's not because, I turned into some kind of hippie, right? It's because I began to discover the truth and began to rediscover, or actually maybe for the first time, the way God designed it to work to start with. It's like, oh, so when I do this, I'm just aligning with the way God made it to work. And the benefits for a lot of people, most people probably, is that they lose the weight, is that their skin gets better, is that their thyroid condition goes away, is that their cancer goes into remission. There's so many things that happen from it. And so I'm trying to make sure that we tie in and we marry God with health. And I think that's what we're trying to expose here. And there is hope for people who have the diagnosis. There is hope for people who don't have the diagnosis but think that it's possible for them.
Amen. Because you can put a plan of prevention in place.
There are tools at your disposal, and they don't have to cost $1 million.
And they're God-given, that's right. And that's the key. All the 8 keys in my book, I have 3 categories to the steps, basically. The first category is for someone who's on a budget. Most of those things are free, little cost. The next category is someone who's in the cancer journey. You're going to have to do more. And then there's the person like me who's had an aggressive and deadly cancer, and the risk for it coming back is high. So I have to do even more. And so, we can all do something.
Yeah. And what I found is that when you combine those together, when you combine hydration and rest and exercise and nutrition and spirituality and sort of removing some of the sources of toxins that we get, some unbeknownst to us even, but when we become aware of those things. But that when we do all of those things together, I have found that it's put me in a place of peace and internal that I've never experienced before. And it's all in the way God designed it to work, and it's all at our fingertips. And it's just about exposing those things and becoming conscious of it and making decisions that put us on those paths. They're not impossible. In fact, they're not even that hard. You just got to start walking down those paths. You got to start discovering what they are. Your book does a great job of that. And, I look at somebody like you who's gotten a aggressive breast cancer diagnosis, and then where you are 6 years later, it's working for you.
Because God designed it to work that way.
Yeah.
It's all, like you said, it's all back to that. And as I learn new information, I do put it on my blog at www.GinnyBrant.com. As new research comes out, as new ideas come out, I continue to research and then put it out there on the blog, or get into more detail about blueberries and avocados and these superfoods, things that I didn't have room for in the book. So I just continue to research and educate people, because I believe that education is key. We must understand that we need to change our lifestyle and why. And that helps me to change my eating habits, to know that what I'm eating is what God designed to complement my DNA.
Yeah.
And that's where you said the peace is coming from.
Yeah.
Because when I know that I'm doing everything I can, then if it's time for me to go to heaven, then it's time for me to go. And I didn't cut my own life short through careless habits.
Yeah, some people say that. Well, good Lord's going to take me some way or another. I'll just, keep. And I always say, you know what? He is. I'm not going to do it for him. I'm going to let him take me when he's ready. I'm not going to go play dodge car in the middle of the interstate and say, hey, he'll take me at some point. You don't play with that kind of fire. You do everything you can. Paul says it well, and when he says, and this is one of my mottos, is to live is Christ, and to die is gain. When I read that, I know that when I die, I'll be with him eternally. But he calls us to be him. And so to live is Christ. And so we as Christians especially should be doing everything that we can to live as long as we can, so that we can point as many people toward him as we can for his kingdom. That's how he is
takes
glorified.
us home.
That's right. We don't need to be making those decisions for ourselves by destroying the temple that he resides in. The very author of life, the Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, is alive inside of you and inside of me. And we are to care for that dwelling place as if the living God lives there, because he does. And that's just that's an important truth that we need to remember. Just as in true God nature, he wants all these good things for us. So it's not like we have to live this awful life to care for his temple. That when we do take care of that thing, such joy follows it. Such wholeness follows it. Such life comes from it. And I think that's what Christians that don't really understand or wanting to know a little bit more about health need to know. That you don't have to suffer to live a healthy life and to take care of your body. I'm sitting here across from what I would call as a breast cancer aggressive survivor. The scans continue to come back in a good place for you, and you're living it. And you were healthy before, but you really have learned a lot about the things that were causing that for you that you just weren't aware of, and the toxins that were found in your body that came from food and that came from products around you and all the other things. So I've read a lot of books on health, and I've read a lot of books on spirituality. This one I recommend because I think it does a really nice job of surfacing the things that God created. Not only the things God created, but the things that man has created that take us away from health. that we can become aware of and move our lifestyles away from, but still live a good, healthy life. You talk about cell phones even, and the things that are unhealthy about our use of cell phones. Well, in no point do you say you need to banish cell phones from your life altogether. There's just ways that you can manage that in a healthier way. Since reading that book, I was like, gosh, you know what? Every night I charge my cell phone up, and it's sitting on the nightstand right next to me. Why? I mean, I have a do not disturb on mine from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So unless there's a real emergency, I don't get any notifications just so I can sleep. Does it need to be 1 foot from my head?
I recommend it be in another room. Like if you're in the master bedroom, put it in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've
Especially
just
while
mine.
you're charging it. And again, these are things that it's not a overnight thing. Oh,
No.
you're going to die of something because you did this. It's not that at all. But the scientific research is beginning to show that cell phone radiation does have an impact on the body down to the very cell.
Yeah.
And when you see these things, you have to look and say, okay, how can I, in the society we live, which can't function without Wi-Fi, gosh, especially during COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can't function without internet access. How can I make it so that my body's not continually being bombarded and not putting the cell phone on the body, and especially at night? You just don't want anything that's going to interfere with your sleep at night. And Wi-Fi being on in the house, just turn that button off. There's a Wi-Fi button on your router. Just go off.
Yeah.
Last person that goes to bed, turn it off, and then you turn it back on the next morning. You're not using it, so it doesn't have to be there.
Yeah. I mean, I've since reading the book, I've done little things like moving the cell phone a distance from me rather than having it right by my head while it's charging, because I don't need it by my head. In fact, I could leave it completely on a downstairs because I won't pick it up again until I'm back downstairs. So I've done little things like that just are reminders of how man has created things that we become used to, but that they can be sources of some of this toxicity that gets into our bodies. And so the book does a great job of sort of making us aware of the things that are in our food and how we can make adjustments and that are in our environment, and how we can make adjustments to live a healthier lifestyle without a whole lot of dramatic change. And so the book is good, and I've given it to my mom, who had breast cancer and is in the process of getting into a healthier place. My mother-in-law, also breast cancer. She's read the book already, and I think my mom is finishing that up as well. My wife and others have come back and talked about changes they've made based off of things they learned in the book. And so I'll have links to that on our website, of course, and in the show description that you'll see as you're listening to this. You can click on that there and get access to that and to Jenny's blog and that sort of thing. So just a wonderful resource. When somebody has gone through what you've gone through, and especially dug into it with the depth in which you dug into it, and then sort of assembled the things that you learned in each phase of this and tied it into the way God originally designed, is really well done. And I enjoyed the book, and it was well written as well. So sometimes these books are difficult to get through because the writer is not good, but the writing is excellent as well. So it's an easy.
It was written with chemo brain.
It was an easy read. Maybe
I had editors coming behind me.
Well, you did a good job on it, and I think it's powerful, and I think it's really important for people. I really do. I think we take our health for granted until we don't have it. And I think there are things that we can be doing now to ensure that we don't go through these things that could cost us our lives, and that we could tie our physical lives more closely to the way God designed things to work, and live more in harmony with His will as it relates to those two things as well. And we should be doing that. And I think that's a part of spirituality we probably don't talk as much about. And I think health is a big part of spirituality. There's so many places. If you dig through Scripture and you just try to look at it from a health perspective, so much in there is telling you how to do it. We don't think about it that way. We think about, when we're mad with somebody or relationships and that sort of thing, in God's providence, it definitely ties to that as well. But if you look at it through the lens of health, you'll see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all through there.
Don't let the sun go down on your anger because it lowers your immune system.
That's right. Exactly. That's another one of the major benefits of that piece of Scripture is exactly that. So looking at Scripture through the lens of health is a really interesting exercise that we should do, and it will shed new light on things. So read the book, Unleash Your God-Given Healing. 8 Steps to Prevent and Survive Cancer. It's not just cancer, but all kinds of diseases. It's the formula that God gives us from Ginny Dent Brant. And Ginny, I'm just so thankful for your hospitality and inviting me here.
Well, thank you, Stacy, for having me, and thank you for what you do to try to get a message out there. I think it's amazing to hear about your life and the changes that God has made so that you can serve Him full time.
Well, the honor is mine, and I'm thankful for this new friendship, and I'm looking forward to an ongoing dialogue. So thanks again, Jenny.
Thank you.
I love how science and the personal experience of so many people today is revealing the truths about health that God established from the beginning, found in the ancient pages of the Holy Bible. I hope today is a step for you in your own journey of discovery of scripturally sound health. I encourage you to do your own search for truth about how God designed our bodies to thrive and what you can do to make the temple that is your body and those of your family as strong and healthy as possible. Ginny Brant did, and is reaping benefits far beyond simply her survival. Thank you for joining us today on A Stronger Faith. To learn more about Ginny, access her blog on spiritually sound health, get her book, or to connect with her, please visit GinnyBrant.com. That's GINNYBRANT.com. For more episodes, to recommend a guest, or to support this ministry, please visit astrongerfaith.com. Until next time, we pray for peace, good health, and a stronger faith for you and those you love.